Well, here we are with Kevin Hailey from Canberra, Australia. And a quick disclaimer, I know Kevin personally, and I know his music, and I've played some music with him on various occasions, and he's a bass player, and he studied in Canberra at the ANU.
Mm-hmm.
You got a jazz diploma.
I did.
And then he spent some time in Sydney.
Many years.
And your brother's a guitarist, right?
My older brother's a guitarist.
Your older brother's a musician.
So is my younger brother.
Oh, right.
He's in Melbourne.
Right. And then you moved to New York a year ago.
Year and... what is it? 3 months, nearly 4 months. Something like that.
And you're married to Jane Irving. Right?
Yes, we got married a couple of weeks after we got here.
Okay, so can you tell me some of the most interesting gigs that you did in Australia before you left?
Oh, that's a lot of gigs over a long time.
Do any stick out?
I guess the years I spent working with Jeff Duff would, there's some good stories there.
He's quite a character. Tell me your best Jeff Duff story. The one that's not going to offend anyone.
God. There's a lot. I mean, we worked together.
For how long?
For probably about 6 or 7 years. Made a couple of albums, and some of them at vast. The second one cost us an outrageous amount of money.
Really?
Yeah, unbelievable.
You got strings and.
Oh, we sort of did a
Tanks.
Produced effort, but didn't actually have a producer as such. So the band tried doing it. Well, I think it cost us about $25,000, but
Oh my goodness!
we did actually make it all back reasonably quickly. So that was.
How did you make it back?
We sold out 4 nights at the Opera House.
Oh right, fantastic.
It got us out of a big lot of trouble.
What was the music that you performed?
That was it was sort of loosely a David Bowie meets Frank Sinatra sort of concept.
Oh, it's a great
You
concept.
It was kind of fun. It wasn't a jazz thing. It was like a show.
Yeah.
And,
And did you play electric bass or acoustic bass or
both in that.
right? And is he? Does he have a clear idea about where he's heading with his life or his music, or like artistically, or? I mean, that sort of seems like a bit of a whim of an idea, yeah? I mean, he loves David Bowie, right?
Yeah.
And he loves Frank Sinatra, so why not combine them?
I guess that, it sort of ran its course. That sort of concept, I guess, ran for a couple of years, 3 years or so. And
What other albums did you do with him? What other things did you do with him?
there were 2 of the Bowie meets Sinatra stuff, and a lot of just trio gigs, piano and bass, and doing the RSLs,
Really?
the rent pays
in New South Wales?
Yeah. The Castle Hill RSL and North Sydney Leagues Club and
Did you go
all those kind
to
of
Newcastle, that far, like Ettalong or
Yeah,
Wollongong?
There were out of town shows. The Central Coast we worked a bit.
Did you drive there and do a gig and then drive back?
That was generally the thing, yeah.
With how many people?
The full band was I think 6 or 7. Backing singers if we could afford them. So.
And what could you describe what the reception of the music was like at, say, the Castle Hill RSL? How many people would come? If it was Bowie,
those sort of
Sinatra,
things.
Yeah.
No, the smaller things were just those standard New South Wales RSL club gigs where you just kind of some people listen, some people don't.
They have like some sort of ballroom or you're just in the main.
A particular
area near
gig
the bar.
I'm thinking about was just a courtyard, Sunday afternoon courtyard thing.
Right. Right. I mean, I used to work in RSL clubs. I mean, it's been 15 years. So, my perception was that to some degree it had died. In terms of, I mean, a lot of those clubs had a band in them every night of the week that was a regular band.
Yeah.
But this was just more like they have an act on, so they still have an act on on a Saturday night? Usually a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yeah, they'll put the shows in, but I think the, you know, your classic sequence duo or whatever is...
That still happens? I remember when that started.
It's probably died off to some degree, but I think it's still happening.
But those clubs are still quite profitable, aren't they? Mostly,
huge.
Because they have like a sort of football court full of poker machines. Some of them, right?
Yeah, and I
Hundreds
think
of-
in
hundreds of poker machines.
some of the outlying suburbs, there's not a lot really to do. So the bigger clubs become
The only place to go socially.
you know
People meet there.
yeah
Families meet there even on a Sunday for lunch.
watch football, eat a crappy roast, and gamble a bit.
Sure, that's interesting. That's nice. It doesn't really happen in New York.
Well,
There isn't an equivalent in New York, is there?
Well, there's the raceway, Aqueduct Raceway or something out on the way to the airport.
I've never been there.
I've not either, but I understand there's a lot of pokies, and you can go and gamble your rent money away if you want to.
It's hard to think of just a place like that though, where there's sort of, that's almost like a family-oriented meeting place. I mean, there's IKEA. You can go and have meatballs at IKEA. Have you ever done that? That's sort of
I've never eaten their food actually.
It's not bad. That's quite similar to an RSL club in terms of there's kind of a cross section of people from different communities all sitting together.
I guess there's a similar vibe of entrapment too, that you turn up and once you're there you kind of have to be there for a little while. I don't know. Jane and I went to IKEA once when we first got here, because we didn't really have anything. We had a couple of suitcases full of clothes, and it was like, all right, we've got to go and buy the tea towels and the plates and the knives and forks. And
yeah, I went through that.
we spent, I don't know, 4 hours in there, and I was really getting close to the end of my tether. And the couple in front of us lost it first. This chick was like, I'm here shopping on my own, and you're not helping, and bad.
Yeah, it's a stressful place.
And once she lost it, I was fine. I kind of relaxed and started smiling.
You thought there was something wrong.
We're close. We're going to make it, It was okay.
So it took you 4 hours to get from one end to
It was
the other.
about 4 hours. But we did get all the crap we needed in one trip.
Did you buy a mattress there as well?
No.
You bought that somewhere else?
No, we bought our bed from Macy's.
Macy's.
Of all places.
Right. And what about, did you have any musical equipment when you arrived?
A bass guitar. The one bass guitar I owned that I brought from Australia.
What sort of bass is that?
It's just a Fender jazz bass. I had a couple of other ones that I sold. Of course, I sold one of the ones I would have liked to have kept, but when you're getting rid of everything you own, it's kind of like...
Did you keep any stuff in storage or?
No, pretty much got rid of everything. My double bass I've left with my parents in Canberra. They've still got that, but sold a couple of electric basses and a bunch of amplifiers.
And did you buy acoustic bass here?
Yeah, I bought a bass here a couple of days after I got here. I'd been doing homework on it for a while. It's basically bringing my old German bass from Australia was going to cost me around about as much as buying one here, and that's worked out well. The instrument I got, it's kind of light and easy to play, and
my impression is people use shorter basses in New York a little bit, but they're more inclined towards like a 3/4 bass, or is that just my impression?
I mean, it could be. What I was sort of getting to was that having to carry one of those things on the subway, having an instrument that is light and kind of new, so there's no cracks in it, and it's a big load off not having to sort of worry about a 160-year-old bass and someone falling on it and that whole thing. But yeah, a smaller bass is nice just because it's easy to play. I haven't played on a 3/4 bass for 14 years or something, so having an instrument where you're like that rather than like that it's nice.
It's nice. Did it sort of mess your intonation up a bit, the fact that the scale changed?
A little, but like any bass you play, they're all different all the time. Even the same instrument on different days, you can be
Right.
making shifts. So,
Right.
you know, that was a small thing to worry about.
And do you have insurance for all your gear or no? And what about, do you have health insurance?
No, I don't.
Do you have travel insurance?
We did. It's currently lapsed, and given that I'm an American citizen, and you know, I mean, the insurance companies are all too happy to take your money, but I've heard plenty of stories about guys who've tried to then claim, and you know, oh, you're on travel insurance, so when does your holiday end?
Yeah.
It's a little hard to prove when you bought a one-way ticket and you're an
Yeah.
American citizen, you know.
Yeah. I managed to do it for a while, but it did get harder, and I started to just worry if it really was like a lot of money, then they'd really start to, because I was just sort of going to the GP and charging $50 or you know, and then or getting some antibiotics and then charging, and they didn't. Usually that was cool, but I wondered if it was really was a large sum of money that they might like sort of. Push
Yeah,
you in
I mean,
that
I think,
question.
you know, for the small stuff, I'm sort of blessed with reasonably good health, so, you know, the small stuff I don't really worry about. If I get a cold, I'll just ride it out.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't had to see a doctor here.
And you're still young. How old are you?
I'm 38 in a week.
38.
38 in 1 week.
You are younger than your age. You look younger than your age. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, 11th of April is my birthday.
So it's not something you really worry about too much, not having health insurance doesn't stress you out?
No. I mean, I think I'm still in a position here where I'm kind of dealing with survival on a kind of day-to-day basis, so you know, the bigger picture things are still coalescing.
In theory, you could go back to Australia if something happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, given my family situation and everything like that, like if I did get seriously sick or something like that, I'd probably be inclined to head back to Australia anyway.
Yeah. You still probably got your Medicare card, right?
Yeah.
I think that lasts for 10 years, or I think you can keep using it.
I think I do. I mean, as long as you retain citizenship.
Yeah. So you're a dual citizen, is that?
Dual citizen.
So you've got 2 passports?
I do.
And when you get to the airport here, you show them your American passport?
Correct.
And when you get to Australia, you show them your Australian passport?
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a good... So you have to carry... Do you carry both with you?
I have to carry both. If I can't be admitted to the US with an Australian passport.
Right.
Before I knew what travelling on 2
and
passports
if you went to
was.
Paris, what would you do then?
Take my pick, I guess. From here, I guess if I left, you know, if I went to Paris from the US, I'd travel on an American passport. But I could probably enter Europe on.
If you knew you were
whatever I
coming
chose
back
to.
here, you'd want to have the American one with you.
Yeah, I've actually tried. I was working on cruise ships a few years back and didn't know about the whole 2 passport thing, and tried to get into the US with my Australian passport, and ladies looked through it, said, "Where's your visa?" I was, "Visa?
I'm American.
I've got an American passport." She said, "Oh, that's all I want." You know, so.
And you had both?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how long did you work on cruise ships for?
I did that for, it was like 7 months, 7 or 8 months.
When was that?
2007.
So before you came here?
Yeah, actually, the first I did a 4-month contract at the start of 2007 and came to New York in like June of 2007 for about a month.
Was that the first time you'd come here?
Yeah, I'd finished the contract and was staying with my parents.
In Canberra?
Yeah, and kind of had nothing to do because I was in a city I didn't live in and I'd been away for 4 months, and I got kind of a bit bored, and I think on Monday I bought the ticket to come to New York, and Wednesday I left. So I just showed up, you know.
That's cool.
And it was good. I had a great time, you know, that sort of...
Was your brother here then, or...? Because he was here for a while.
Yeah, my brother Marty was here the last summer, so
Right.
2011. He was working on a show called Empire. So yeah, he was here for like 4 months over summer, or 3 months.
But the time you came in 2007, you were by yourself?
Yes.
And what was your impression of it?
I had good impressions. I mean, I stayed in, I think, possibly the worst accommodations in the city. It's a place called the Glenwood Hostel in Broadway in Williamsburg.
Broadway?
Right off the Marcy Avenue stop.
Oh, yeah.
Underneath the railway tracks.
Yeah.
That's
just to paint the picture for listeners that in Williamsburg there's a train line that runs across Broadway, which is sort of a main street that runs out to. It starts at Williamsburg and then you get to sort of Bushwick and Bed-Stuys on your right, and it's pretty grubby compared to Australia. I would say it's a pretty grubby place.
That particular section.
And underneath the train line is sort of almost pitch black.
Yeah, and it's Puerto Rican on one side of the road and Orthodox Jews on the other. That was an interesting joint because I was sort of travelling on a budget, and I didn't want to stay in a hostel with like heaps of other people, and I didn't have the money to sort of stay in a proper hotel. So
you had your own room.
Found this joint. It was $20 a night, but the room was it was like a cubicle, and it actually had a chicken wire ceiling, so I could hear the people snoring next door and the people having sex a couple of doors down.
No.
Yeah, the place was like disgusting.
And you shared a bathroom?
Yeah. That's not even worth talking about, man. I went and bought thongs the next day to shower in. And
yeah, I've been through that situation.
I'd been there a day and these guys in suits showed up. They said, "We're from the health department. We're investigating the bed bugs."
Oh, no!
I don't know about that, man. I'm just a tourist.
Oh, no.
So I stayed there for like a week and then just thought, this is kind of dangerous and really nasty. So
you went somewhere else?
Yeah, I found a room in Chelsea, which was okay. It was still kind of grotty, but...
What do you mean by a room?
I just like a room in an apartment, you know.
Right. You sublet it or you found on Craigslist?
Found it in the Village Voice.
The Village Voice?
Yeah.
Yeah, so room for rent?
Yeah. Stayed there a few more weeks. That was okay. The first impression of the city was great, though, to just show up completely unplanned and have a good time, you know. Met some great people and...
It's easy to get
really
around.
Liked it. Yeah. You know.
And what was your impression of the music when you came here?
I loved it. You know, first time I came here, I got to see a lot of really cool things. I think the first gig I went to see was John Schofield playing with Jack DeJohnette and Larry Goldings.
Wow, that's a good band.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. You know, that was really cool. And saw Keith Jarrett's trio play at Carnegie Hall.
Wow.
There was one night I wanted to see Jill Scott. She was playing at Radio City. And the gig had sold out. And I thought, maybe I'll get a standby ticket. And went up to the box office and they got me a standby ticket, put me in row, like double A, that far away from the stage.
Wow.
Kind of thing. That was a cool gig.
She had a band with her?
Yeah. You know.
Nice, tearing it up.
Yeah, it was great. And that's an amazing hall.
So tell me about studying in Canberra.
That was...
Who was your bass teacher? Eric Lamont?
No, I was there before Eric. I was there when George Urbacek was teaching. George is, I think, now in Lismore. Has been for some time.
And Cole Horwig was in charge of everything, or the drum teacher?
No, he was just teaching drums.
Mike Price was in charge, right?
Yeah, I think when I started, this guy called Don Johnson was running the school, who... I can't remember if he died round about the time I finished, maybe before. I think Mike Price took over somewhere around there. The timeline's confused because it was a long time back. But Canberra was, you know, that was a really good thing to do. I mean, in particular, Mike and Cole I learned a lot from. I was lucky enough to be doing a few gigs with those guys. And, you know, at that sort of young age, being able to work with some guys that knew some stuff and weren't afraid to kind of putting you in your place. It was good.
Yeah, they've helped a lot of people, those two guys, haven't they?
Yeah.
A lot of people. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of guys that come through that situation and got really good at it.
Yeah, I mean the Canberra school was a cool thing to do. I mean, pretty much everybody I can think of that I was friendly with there is still playing, you know, professionally, and everybody's still doing it.
Who else was in your year? Did you go to school with?
My year we had a lot of bass players. Duncan Brown. Funkin' Duncan. He's still working hard, man. Jay Miller. Hans Lovejoy. Hans is actually, he lives up in Byron now. He's been the editor of the local Byron paper for quite some time. Who else was in my year? Adam Bishop was a fine saxophone player. He's been living in England for years. I'm forgetting people all over the place.
So how many of them stayed in Canberra?
The guys that were in my year?
Yeah.
There was a drummer called Chris Thwaite, who I'm pretty sure stayed in town.
How many of them stayed in Australia?
I think probably most people, but it's a long time that I was there. So.
Did you talk about that with the other people when you were at school? Do you remember that? Do you remember having that sort of, are we going to stay in Canberra? Are we going to go and live in Sydney? Are we going to go and live in Melbourne? Are we going to go and live in New York? Are we going to go and live in London? Do you remember that?
I know that Sydney was always sort of
closest place.
3
hours down the road.
Stepping stone.
Yeah.
And you know, there was and is a lot of great music and musicians there. So yeah, I think once I started getting a little bit serious about it, just by default, I started hanging out in Sydney. You know. And got to the point, my girlfriend at the time lived there, and I was actually in a couple of bands in Sydney, so I was generally driving up once or twice a week even.
And your brother was playing guitar, your older brother, Marty. Did he move to Sydney first, or?
Yeah, he was there a good 3 or 4 years before me, possibly even longer.
I have a memory of playing with him, and then you coming and doing a gig. And maybe you still lived in Canberra even, or that you just arrived, or
possibly, because we did a few gigs sort of around that time. I guess the first year I was in Sydney.
So did you live with him when you moved to Sydney, or
no?
How would you compare moving to Sydney to moving to New York?
Personally, couldn't really be much different.
They're completely different.
Well, for me, I mean, like I said, when I moved to Sydney, I was already in bands there. My girlfriend lived there. My brother lived there.
Yeah.
So I was kind of spending a lot of time there already. And, you know, I owned a car, so when I moved, I just put all my shit in the car and drove there.
Yeah.
Whereas coming here...
And if you wanted to go home to see your parents, you could just get in the car and...
Yeah, get in the car and drive 3 hours down the road.
Yeah.
You know, coming here is a lot more involved, that it's the other side of the planet. You know, I had to get rid of all of my stuff and come here. And I guess the sort of network, you know, back home in Australia is you know a lot of people, whereas here I know some people, and that's been really awesome to have a little bit of support and people that I know I can talk to. But yeah, coming to another country is really a bigger move than moving just down the road.
Yeah. So did you feel isolated in the beginning, or
no?
Feel lonely? I mean, you're lucky that you've got a nice girl with you. That would help.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't think I couldn't have really done this myself.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I could have, but like, I didn't. The time wasn't right, and you know, having Jane with me has made an incredible difference.
Yeah.
With all of this.
I found it very hard to be here by myself, I must say. It was really tough. You know, and there were less Australians here then. I mean, how do you find the community of Australians here helpful? Do you spend a lot of time with them, or do you feel? I mean, I asked this question to someone else. Do you feel that it's a bad idea to spend all of your time with Australians?
I don't want to offend anyone, but yeah, I mean, I guess spending all of your time with Australians, definitely. Like,
Yeah.
It's really cool knowing that there's people here, and you know, even guys close to me. I mean, you live half an hour walk away.
Yeah.
And it's great to know that there's, you know, some ready-made communication and some people that I've known for a while. And but having said that, I didn't come here to hang out with Aussies.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I came here to get to know some Americans and
Yeah.
get to know a bit about the culture. You know,
And what's your impression of how's your impression of Americans changed since you arrived? As people, as musicians? Oh, it's a difficult question.
yeah.
I mean, is it what you expected, or?
I don't know what I expected, and I think as a rule, I've really tried to avoid expectations about more or less anything as much as I can. And I think expectations can really act as a filter on what actually is, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I guess the only sort of coherent thing I could say is it's a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger here culturally than I ever thought it was. And I haven't even really seen any of the country. I've just been in New York, and as far as I understand, New York's not really the rest of America.
It's very different. Do you have any friends from other parts of America, or people you've spent a lot of time with that are from another part,
Sort of
another
other
place? Yeah, other than New York.
Yeah, I mean, I've got sort of a neighbour that I spend a bit of time with who's from California, you know. But yeah, the cultural thing, you know, the whole thing with, like, you know, the Latin thing, the Puerto Ricans and the Dominicans, and the black thing, you know, is something that's, we don't have that in Australia, you know.
The Cosby Show doesn't really give you a good impression of what it's really like, does it?
Well, that was shot sort of in my part of Brooklyn, and
Where are you living now, sorry?
we're in Carroll Gardens.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, my part of town, parts of it do look like that, and it's beautiful, but there's not many black people there,
Yeah.
if any.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's
It's quite a shock, isn't it, to just go from a completely white place and then to just you can walk for 10 minutes and then suddenly you're in a community that's totally black and totally different, like they're poor.
yeah.
I mean, apart from Redfern in Sydney, which is sort of one block or two, there's not many places in Sydney where you can just kind of go across the road almost, and the
Yeah, it can be funny how
totally
fast
changes.
the neighbourhoods change. You know? And I guess the racial thing here is so much more entrenched than it was in Australia, or is. You know, a lot of it really kind of saddens me, man, that, you know, this society is kind of so polarised between the haves and the ain't never gonna haves.
It's
you know?
almost, well, there's the race thing, and it's almost, for me, there's just it's the rich and the poor as well, just the poor people are in a really bad spot.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for them to get out of it for so many reasons, including, for a lot of them, their skin colour.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like the economic system in this country it's kind of broken, man. It's, you know, I don't know how they're going to fix things, or if they're going to fix things. That it's something like 7% of the population of this country is controlling 80% of the money. And, you know, if you're looking at wages, I mean, I'm about to start doing a cafe job that pays $5 an hour. Right?
What's the minimum wage in Australia?
minimum wage here is $7.25, so I'm working for less than minimum.
But you've got it.
Good tips.
You're an American citizen, so you're not. It's not like you're working illegally. It's
Yeah.
just someone's paying you that much money.
I mean, this is, the service economy in this country. I worked a day job during February doing basically like dropping off lunches at office buildings, and the way those office buildings, it's almost an analogy for the rest of this country, that you've got the guys that go in the front door in the suits and sit in headphones and manage other people's money, and there's the guys that go in the back door that bring the mail and bring the lunches, and kind of very polarised here.
Yeah, it is. I don't see that. That's one thing I think about, is just that there's the word jazz, and there's sort of jazz includes Latin music and almost like Mexican music, and it's almost like that there's venues where it's predominantly black people play, and radio stations, and that doesn't really exist in Australia. Or it's hard to think of another country even where there's a separate culture for people of a certain race within a country.
Yeah.
Is there? I mean, I always try to think of another example of that, but I can't really. It's a very unique thing here, culturally, musically.
Yeah, and more than one, because the way even the neighbourhoods are organised, you see this a lot. You'll have some Jewish guys live over here, and the Puerto Ricans live here, and the white guys live here, and the black people live there, and then
it doesn't.
It can all be a little compartmentalised.
My wife and I used to live in East Lakes, which was a real sort of melting pot, like Queens, but it was just really, just a total lumping together of in my building there was just someone from every different country, Fiji, Armenia, Lebanon, Australia, just all kind of, and the next building was another completely different, it was a little bit Muslim, but still just people from everywhere. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to reconcile that. I find that hard to reconcile, because it's confronting. Yeah.
And to me, that's sort of, lately anyway, has been really one of the most interesting things about being here is actually getting a proper look at the society. I think the first year I was here was just getting myself organised and all that. And I think when you're somewhere for a little bit longer and you can kind of have a look under the rug, it's like, oh man, there's some stuff down here, Excuse me.
No. And so, can you tell me what you hope to achieve by coming here? Did you have any serious goals, or just wanted to have a look?
Yeah, I mean, now I've been here for a while, it sort of all sounded a bit frivolous of just going to show up and have a look and do some gigs. And that's still, I guess, more or less where I'm at,
Come and do some playing in New York.
Yeah. For me, I really wanted to work on just like the, I guess, straight ahead playing, just playing on tunes and developing that language. And, I think you can do that anywhere in the world, but certain places are maybe better for that. And, since being here, I've been lucky enough to access a lot of great musicians and more or less doing musically what I want to do. Like I'm learning a lot of new songs, and
it's cool
getting to play with some great people.
It's nice that there's so many people to choose from. Did you feel like in Sydney that you'd played with everyone and that you'd sort of, in terms of, in an exploratory sense, that you'd explored most of the possibilities that that you could get your hands on in Sydney? Or
maybe I'd been there for a long time. I think, like any city, it's what you make of it. I'm probably not as much of a go-getter as I could be. I'm not sort of
run around with a business card every night.
yeah, I'm not writing my own albums on any sort of regular basis. But I think just going somewhere else, be it New York or Timbuktu, you know, you bring more of yourself to a situation, and you know, I've felt myself kind of opening up since being here, both personally and musically. Like, I can feel some things that I don't know if it's either I didn't want to feel them before, or I didn't for whatever reason, but yeah, just the sort of, you know, personal challenges of being in this place have forced me to, I guess, bring more of myself to the table. And
do you feel like your aspirations have changed in terms of your musical aspirations since you've come here? No, you're still
really.
Pretty interested in just playing straight ahead, swinging acoustic bass. Is that playing tunes?
Yeah.
You haven't, you haven't sort of suddenly woken up and decided I want to write some music, or I want to learn to play Latin music, or.
I mean, I've been working on my guitar playing a little bit since being here, but
have you had more time on your hands or less time on your hands than you did in Australia, do you think?
it comes and goes. Seems to be, I don't know, it's still early days, but things seem to be quite seasonal here. I think that was the case in Sydney to some degree too, with your busy periods and your not busy periods. But, for the most part, probably about the same, but yeah, it sort of comes and goes. So, you know, March for me last month was very quiet, didn't really have much work on, and being not busy in this city is kind of a drag, you know, because
it feels like everyone's working sometimes.
Yeah, and if you've got nothing to do, you know, you got to find something to do, or you start getting really pretty dark.
And what was I going to say? My brain's fried. Has your impression of Australian musicians changed since you've come here?
I haven't really heard any of them. I mean, it's
what you heard when you're in Australia, do you look at that with a different perspective now? Has your opinion of it changed, or do you put on Midnight Oil? I mean, that's what I used to do. Do you put on Midnight Oil sort of nostalgically and listen to that? I mean, I remember getting into Cold Chisel in New York, which I never listened to in Australia.
The odd Cold Chisel tune pops up on my phone sometimes, and but I always kind of like Cold Chisel.
Liked it.
You know.
Yeah. So you haven't. Your opinion of all that stuff hasn't really changed. Not so much.
No, I mean, you know, the really good players that I used to hear back home are
still really good
by
players.
anybody's standard, most musicians, and yeah, no, I probably got more respect for some of the stuff that's happening.
And what about, has your opinion of American music changed and American musicians since you've come here?
Well, I've got a little bit of insight into it. You know, I think it's sort of interesting the way, you know, what's coming out of the music schools. It's kind of quite different to the, you know, traditional swinging standards thing, and you know, I think that's probably the same in a lot of places. But you know, going to play with some guys who've maybe just come out of NEC and play amazing, play all this stuff, but you know, don't know any standards. And then at the same time, I'm not as familiar with that whole lexicon that a lot of guys are operating in this newer thing. So I'm learning a lot. You know.
I felt like I had to learn to play in 7/4 when I came to New York. Eventually, I couldn't. I wasn't interested in it when I was young. I didn't listen to the Mahavishnu Orchestra, or you know, I wasn't really interested in that sort of thing. But I just, in order to be comfortable here, I felt like I had to learn to do some of those funny things that I just didn't put a lot of weight on. So yeah, it's interesting how different it is.
Mm.
And did you consider going to music school here, or was that something you thought about, or you could still do it?
Yeah, I have thought about that. I mean, the expense of going to schools in this country is outrageous, man, and you know that whole thing with student loans and the trillions of dollars that students owe to the government. It's disgusting. That you've got people bankrupting themselves at 20 years of age, fresh out of university. It's wrong on so many levels. So if I could figure out a way around that, but no, I'd love to do some study here.
Have you had any private lessons, or
no? It's largely been a financial thing. Just haven't had the cash. But you know, I think probably, I mean, privately is a great place to study because there's so many great musicians here, and
especially acoustic bass players.
Yeah, and you can just ring somebody up, you know, rather than try to go through admissions and all that. But really, man, some of the people you get to play with is
that's a lesson enough in itself.
Yeah, and really, like, you know, I learned a lot of stuff in music school, but as far as like playing the bass, really, I kind of learned
on the job
most of what I know through 3 years of just doing gigs, you know.
Yeah. And have you found it hard to get paid to play music here?
To get decent amounts of money, yeah.
How do you feel about that, doing gigs for $50, and is that difficult, or?
Can be. You know, I mean, if you're doing enough of them, and I guess that's another thing here, is you can work
a lot,
most or every night of the week if you.
Do you think it would be possible to just survive playing the bass in New York and not touring around and just doing gigs? Do you think it's possible to do that financially?
Well, you said before touring around, I thought, yeah, I know plenty of guys who are just playing the bass here in New York, but yeah, without leaving the city, I don't know, man. But I think being a musician, a playing musician, a gigging musician, necessitates travelling anyway.
Yeah.
You know, you're kind of crazy to think you could, even in a place like this, like you have to put some miles on, you know, take it out on the road, and that's part of the life.
Yeah. And how long do you see yourself living in New York?
Oh, I don't know. At least 2 years. At least
2 years from now, or 2 years from when you got here?
Well, say from when I got here, but so it's been a year and a quarter already. So it's going by really fast. One guitarist I was working with, a guy called Bruce Edwards, Bruce said basically 5 years till you really know, you know, in terms of what's good, what you shouldn't do, you know, because I've had a few experiences here already of things that seem like, yeah, that'd be good to go and do that gig, and then it's like, no, it's not. You know, and
because the money wasn't good enough, or the people weren't nice to you,
you know, or not even very good. I mean, there's some really terrible musicians here, and some, you know, I've played with some really interesting people since arriving.
I feel like there aren't many bad musicians in Australia. Like really bad. Do you feel like there's more? Is it just there's more of everything, or is there just sort of more in the middle
hard to say.
In Sydney?
I guess with Australia, it's Sydney, you know, because the pool of musicians is kind of smaller. It probably does regulate out a bit of the
really bad
the
people.
bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
You know, here it's just bewildering the amount of talent here. Like I can't even really get my head around who's at the top, you know, and the middle is huge. The middle here is enormous. But then, yeah, it's bigger, and you just have some people who, I don't know, know the guy who runs the pub on the corner or can talk their way into anything. But man, I've played with some shocking people since being here. But that's cool, you know. I've always.
But you didn't go through that same baptism of fire when you went to Sydney, did you? You didn't have to sort of play with a whole lot of really terrible musicians.
Oh no, I played with a few terrible musicians in Sydney when I moved there.
Right.
But to me, that's always been part of it. You know, that I don't really see myself as like a artist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think it's more about.
You're a working musician. It's about work, is it, or?
Well, yeah, like I guess the analogy would be like a craftsman versus an artist. You know, that it's hard to make a great sort of artistic sculpture if you can't put together a right angle.
Yeah.
You know, that sort of idea. So, yeah, to me, playing the bass in all kinds of bands, all kinds of music, you just find a way to make it work. You know, and sometimes you work with people that aren't so great, you know. And you have to bring another part of your knowledge that maybe is taken for granted or is cool when you're playing with people where you're not addressing that stuff.
Can you tell me a couple of people that you work with that you feel like have really helped you?
Here in New York?
Yeah.
Marion Cowings is a singer I've worked with a bunch.
Yeah. He knows a lot of tunes.
Yeah, he knows a lot of tunes. We spent last summer we were playing at like farmers markets. You know, get up at sort of 7:38 and go and set up a farmers market and play for tips and groceries, which is good. Last summer I didn't spend anything on food.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, Marion's helped me a lot with, you know, learning songs and just playing bass and voice is, you know,
it's cool.
Makes you sort out your time and your tuning and all that.
Does he still teach it at the NYU, or he's not there anymore?
Jazzmobile, I think he does a thing. And he's got a class at Smalls on Sunday afternoons that I usually play for.
Do you go down to Smalls and hang out a fair bit, or?
Not as much. I mean, I haven't really been hanging out anywhere as much as I should, which has been... And that's been another sort of tough thing of being here is you have to be seen constantly, you know. People have got to know you're here because people come and go and all of that. At the same time, you need a bit of money to go to the clubs. I mean, not a lot. And
they charge you to get in there, Smalls?
Not so much anymore. I mean, they kind of know me now, you know, but yeah, you've got to find that balance of, you know, going out and then not blowing your rent while you're out.
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? And what did you get from Marion Cowings that you couldn't get from someone in Australia? That you couldn't get from Jeff Duff?
Well,
maybe he's
different kinds of singers.
Yeah.
I guess harking back to what I was talking about before of, you know, playing the standard songbook and really working on that vocabulary is, you know, there definitely are people back in Sydney that have got all of that and then some, you know, but it's sort of a question of accessibility to some degree, you know, like the 4 or 5 guys in Sydney that I'd want to learn that vocabulary from or work with, they're already busy.
Yeah.
You know, they're already working with other people. They've got their own bands and and then it's, you know, again, there's just more people here doing that. So, you know, just thinking about guitar players that, you know, last week I played with Saul Rubin and Saul, man, every time you play with him, for me, is just so educational because
he's had a lot of experience.
Knows all of it. And can play it on piano and saxophone and everything else too. You know, he's a freak.
He's really quite dedicated to one thing, isn't he? I mean, there's people in Sydney like that too. But he's very specific. Like, he's been playing tunes a long time.
Yeah. So Saul, you know, last night I played with a guitarist called Steve Berger. He's been working with like Bob DeRoe for 20 plus years or something. Ron Afif I'm playing with sort of now and then, and you know, that's just three guys right off the top of my head that are masters of this.
So you like the guitar? You have an affinity for guitarists, do you?
Just seems to have
Happened.
kind of worked out that way so far. You know.
How did you get into the bass? Was your brother already playing guitar? Or
Yeah, he
you
was
were playing guitar too. And
I started playing guitar. I played guitar for about a year or so. Sort of early high school, I picked up the guitar and realised pretty early on, after about a year, I wasn't. You know, my brother was already pretty good at that stage.
So you were a bit intimidated by him already because he could already do it.
And actually, my music teacher at the time, he kind of said, "Man, you should play the bass because nobody's playing the bass. You'll be able to get gigs when you're a bit older." I was like, "All right." And my brother plays guitar, so I can play bass, and that sort of makes sense. And my music teacher was right, Mr. McGee, because he ended up quitting teaching and becoming a musician's agent, and I worked for him a lot before I left Canberra and moved to Sydney.
Right.
So yeah, it was.
So that helped?
Yeah, well, he encouraged me to take up the bass, and then he employed me steadily for 3 or 4 years. So.
And are your parents encouraging of you pursuing a career in music?
Mum and Dad have been unbelievably supportive.
It's great.
Man, it's really incredible. You know,
it's cool. And how do they feel about you coming to New York?
Good, mostly. I think, you know. I hear from Mum that she misses me a lot.
Well, of course.
But you know, I mean, both my parents. You know, my mum is from the States and Dad's from England, so it's not like they've lived their whole lives in Australia
either. Yeah.
You know.
And you've got some American family in America somewhere, right? Your mother's sisters or something?
I've got an uncle who lives in Hawaii. And I've got, I think, various cousins in Nebraska.
But you don't really keep in contact with them? No.
Never really met them in the first place. You know.
So you've never been there, or
haven't been to Nebraska. It's on the list of things to do.
And so, just one last question. I mean, you've said how long you've thought you're going to be here. Do you have any sort of yardstick or any? Is there any way that you'll know that it's time to go back? How will you make that decision?
To go back to Australia?
Yeah. How would you make that decision?
Oh man.
Haven't thought about it.
Haven't really thought about it. I mean, I guess, you know, if things are going really badly, or
what if they just stayed the way they were now?
If things stayed the way they were now, I'd put a use by date on it for sure. I can't say how long, because, you know, for me it's still early days, and I'm going to give it some time. Because I mean, I'm definitely better off now than I was a year ago. And yeah, if it stays static, well, I'd have to think about going somewhere else. But things are kind of on the up, you know.
Let's say just the number of people you're working with doubled, and you're playing the bass every night with people like Marion and Saul and whoever else, you know, other people you aspire to playing to. And then you still had to teach or do some other thing to make a crust. You still think you'd stick it out? Well,
yeah. I mean, it'd be the same more or less any city I could think of. That you're not going to get by just on gigs. Much as I'd like to, man, because, you know, I don't compose a lot and I don't sell a lot of albums. But yeah, that seems to be the nature of the business now.
Yeah, times have really changed, haven't they?
You have to be somewhat diversified in
doing different things to survive.
What you do, or having a lot of streams. So teaching, composing, whatever. But
you still haven't told me your best New York story. You got one to share with us before I turn the camera off?
I don't know. Probably worst New York story.
Yeah,
actually,
worst.
It's pretty amusing. we had a rat come out of our toilet not too long ago.
In Carrot Gardens? Even though you were living in a fairly nice neighbourhood.
Yeah, nice neighbourhood, nice apartment.
How big was it?
It was rat-sized, man. It's,
Yeah.
Well, it could have been that fucking
One
big.
of them jumped on me once. Opened the pantry door and a rat jumped on me. I went to get the pasta.
No, we'd been out for the afternoon and came home, and Jane opened the bathroom door and was like, "Ah!" And
It was swimming around in there?
well, it had been. It had, but the lid of the toilet was up, so this thing had actually come up the toilet pipe, into the toilet bowl, and then onto the seat, and then. So anyway, we.
That's a tough rat.
Yeah.
That's a New York rat.
So we ran downstairs and got the neighbour. You know, I was like, "Can you help?" And he said, "Yeah." And he went and grabbed a bucket, and he's like, "Okay, I'm just going to get you, rat, and put you outside." And and sounded like he was wrestling with a small pig in the bathroom. And that didn't work, and then we sort of built this little corral to try and sweep him out from the bathroom to the front door, and of course he jumped straight over that and under the couch. So me and my neighbour have both got brooms, and we're playing rat tennis, you know. And I had my bass guitar and my double bass in the corner by the end of the couch. I got my big bass out of the way, so I was, you know, not to ruin it. And the rat's come to my end, and it's like, I can't see him. Where is he? And grabbed my bass guitar case, and it had jumped inside the pocket on the front of the guitar case where you leave your lead. So I had my broom, and I was... and, you know, took the thing outside and tipped it upside down. The dead rat fell on the sidewalk. And the bass guitar case was now full of rat blood, so that went in the bin.
Oh, no.
And but yeah, apparently rats
swim up toilets. We have to keep the bathroom door closed.
So now the bathroom door is closed and the lid is left down at all times.
You have to get a clip.
Because man, that was the whole situation probably took 20 minutes, but it was like an hour. You know, Jane locked herself in the bedroom and like put a towel under the door. And she said she was praying. You know, she's not even like that.
Oh, that's good.
Rat up the toilet was. That's my worst New York story.
That's great. Well, I'll turn the camera off. Fascinating. So good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Cool.
All right.
Thanks.